Netflix have done. They've bought Shonda Rhimes, Ryan Murphy, you know, two of the great American writer-creators, and they're now on exclusive deals for those. And before, they propped up their networks, you know, FX and ABC. They were their main suppliers. So I think there's absolutely going to be the case that will start happening here.
And Ryan Murphy is this guy who's reported on the New York Times as being on a $300 million deal.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how true that is, but there's no question they will have had to pay him a lot to do it.
Because a lot of people think, when they think about a battle for talent, which is quite an industry sort of term, they think about getting Benedict Cumberbatch or James Norton to front something. Is the real battle when it comes to talent on writing?
It is. It's all about the writing, because Benedict will come to something if the script is good. So if you start with the script, that's all we have in my business. It's all about the writer and the script and the quality of that work. And Shonda delivers endlessly. Her incredible shows, starting with Grey's Anatomy right through, you know, to incredible shows. And Ryan the same. They're deliverers. They're, you know, it's as close as you can get to a hit, which is very hard in our business.
Dina, doesn't this fill you with joy about the future of content? There's lots of people out there who want fantastic stuff, and you've got to sell adverts around them, but Netflix doesn't have adverts.
Yes.
I'm sure you'd love to get your teeth into that.
Yes, I mean, I think that's why there's different models like David's model we mentioned earlier that are coming about, really, to take advantage of this opportunity that isn't just straight advertising. But it's really interesting there, because I think, again, you know, Netflix is a great product and it's what consumers want, but also TV still has lots of magic that Netflix doesn't, you know, whether it's live content or chat show content, but also, you know, people still want curated content that is led by an editor.
Possibly with adverts around it, if you had anything to do with it. Guys, we've got to leave it there, but we're going to carry on this conversation in the Media Show podcast. You just look online for the Media Show podcast and hit on subscribe. It's as simple as that. For now, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.
The Media Show was presented by Amol Rajan and the producer's Richard Hooper. In a moment, PM.
In the past 20 years, the world of drugs has been increasingly tainted by its association with sport.
Spring on BBC Radio 4.
I loved a dream.
Music takes me to that different place. Isn't that a magical thing?
Even people who don't believe in a soul still believe in a soulmate.
Those nymphs, I want to make them permanent.
Everyone always gets the awards for doing a bit of weepy acting, but actually, I think the comics are the ones with the real skill.
Spring. Would you mind not knocking on our tree for a moment, please?
On BBC Radio 4.
This is BBC Radio 4. It's 5 o'clock and time for PM with Eddie Mayer. The British government destroyed documentation belonging to Windrush migrants. That much we knew last night. The question tonight is, which British government?
Did the Prime Minister, the then Home Secretary, sign off that decision?
Prime Minister?
No, the decision to destroy the landing cards was taken in 2009 under a Labour government.
Reporting live from Westminster, Norman Smith.
The blame game rumbles on, but has Mrs May bought herself some vital breathing space after turning the tables on Labour over the destruction of those crucial Windrush landing cards?
The BBC in the dock over its treatment of Sir Cliff Richard. We're live at the court. Plus, what are the chances of a proper peace between North and South Korea? Later, we'll bring you the peace and quiet of the Forest of Dean. And we have a love story that began many years ago.
The telephone rang in the middle of the night, it seemed to me. I answered it, and my sweet call said, "Guess what? I'm coming home. I've got this bird in the sky, and I'm coming home."
Emma Jane Kirby will tell you what happened next. With the BBC News throughout the hour, Neil Nunes.
Theresa May has apologised for the second day in a row over the treatment of a group known as the Windrush generation of immigrants who arrived in Britain from the Commonwealth in the decades after the Second World War. During Prime Minister's questions, she dismissed Jeremy Corbyn's claim that the government was callous and incompetent, accusing him of allowing anti-Semitism to run rife in his party. Here's our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake.
In the House of Commons, Theresa May apologised again for the government's handling of Windrush immigrants, which has seen some people and their children denied access to healthcare and other public services, and others detained and threatened with deportation. The Prime Minister claimed a decision to destroy thousands of landing card documents, which Labour say could help people prove their status, was taken by officials under a Labour government in 2009. But Jeremy Corbyn accused Theresa May of pushing through changes to immigration rules that led to pain for a whole generation. The Home Office has promised to deal with new cases of people struggling to prove their status within 2 weeks.
The BBC reporter who broke the story about police searching the home of the singer Sir Cliff Richard has been giving evidence at the High Court. On the 5th day of the singer's legal action against the BBC for breach of privacy, Dan Johnson described how he had told his editor he was working on a story about celebrity pedos. The BBC insists that its coverage was in the public interest. Our correspondent, Helena Lee, has been in court in London hearing the evidence.
In an exchange between Sir Cliff Richard's barrister and Dan Johnson, the barrister asked him, "Will you accept that your story has caused massive damage and distress to Sir Cliff Richard?" Dan Johnson replied, "I accept he's been upset about it." Sir Cliff Richard's barrister, "Damage?" he asks him. Dan Johnson says, "In a professional sense, I hope not, because everyone knows he's not been charged." And then, in court, Sir Cliff Richard's barrister said to Dan Johnson, "Are you prepared to apologise to Sir Cliff Richard?" Dan Johnson said, "I am sorry he went through such a difficult time."
A hairdresser who deliberately infected 5 men with HIV and tried to infect 5 others has been given a life sentence. Darryl Rowe, who's 27, will spend at least 12 years in prison. His offences were carried out in Brighton and in the northeast of England when he was on the run from police. He's the first person in the UK to be convicted of spreading HIV. Victims described Rowe as grotesque and a sociopath. Detectives in Glasgow have begun a murder investigation after a man who was shot in the head on Monday night died in hospital. Kenny Riley, who was 29, was shot while in a car stopped at traffic lights in the Maryhill area. West Midlands Police have sacked one of the country's most senior counter-terrorism officers who's been found guilty of gross misconduct. Assistant Chief Constable Marcus Beale had already been fined by magistrates after admitting a breach of the Official Secrets Act when classified documents were stolen from his car. Phil Mackey has this report.
Marcus Beale was head of the West Midlands Counter-Terrorism Unit when the briefcase was stolen last summer. In it were documents from a high-level security meeting. He left it in the boot and only realised it was missing 5 days later. Westminster magistrates fined him £3,500 after they were told it contained documents that could compromise national security. In February, a disciplinary panel found him guilty of gross misconduct. Today he was sacked with immediate effect. The missing documents have never been recovered.
The main measure of inflation has fallen from 2.7% to 2.5%. The drop in the Consumer Prices Index, which is sharper than expected, was driven partly by cheaper women's clothing and alcohol. The figures will be considered by the Bank of England when it decides whether or not to increase interest rates next month. President Trump has confirmed that the CIA Director Mike Pompeo traveled to North Korea last week to hold secret talks with the country's leader Kim Jong-un. In a tweet, Mr. Trump said the meeting went smoothly and the two established a good relationship.
We'll talk more about the Koreas after 5:30. There are many aspects to the Windrush story, and we'll have more on some of them in the next few minutes. But we're going to start with a follow-up to something we were told on PM last night by the Guardian journalist Amelia Gentleman.
We've been contacted by a former Home Office official who worked in one of the departments responsible for processing these kind of cases. And he told us that in October 2010, the government decided to get rid of a huge archive of thousands of landing card slips that recorded the date of Windrush immigration's arrival into the UK. This decision was taken against the advice of caseworkers in this Home Office department. They told their bosses that it would be a really bad idea to destroy these records because it meant that there was no last backup point to go to in case of a disputed entry date. And the reason that the entry date is so significant is because if you arrived in the UK before 1973, then you have an automatic right to be here. So when people in this situation are trying to resolve their difficult immigration situation, having that piece of proof is incredibly important.
We also reported last night that the Home Office confirmed it did destroy some landing cards belonging to Windrush migrants. As a media gentleman said, her source told her the government decided to get rid of historical landing card documents in October 2010. At Prime Minister's Questions today, Jeremy Corbyn asked Theresa May about exactly that.
Yesterday we learnt that in 2010 the Home Office destroyed landing cards for a generation of Commonwealth citizens, and so have told people we can't find you in our system. Did the Prime Minister, the then Home Secretary, sign off that decision?
Prime Minister.
No, the decision to destroy the landing cards was taken in 2009 under a Labour government.
Live on PM, our Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw. What details do we have about this landing card business, Danny?
Well, we do have some more details now, Eddie, coming out of Downing Street. They're saying that in June 2009, of course, Labour was in power at that time, the business case was approved by the UK Border Agency, an agency of the Home Office.